Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to the 25 Days of Linux. Today, what I have here is CuteFish OS. This is an interesting OS. It's based on Ubuntu, if you don't know, and sort of its claim to fame is it's really just sort of trying to expand upon technologies that already exist and make a really full-featured Linux distribution that's, one, super user-friendly, that looks nice. For example, up here, if I click the volume icon, for some reason I have an option to really quickly and easily turn on a dark mode, toggle that on and off, and it is basically super system-wide. It affects everything from this calculator app they've built to the terminal to their file manager that they've built. And actually, I'm pretty sure, this is one of those things you're going to want to fact check me on, but I'm pretty sure they're not using GTK or Qt or anything like that. This is sort of their own spin on things that's supposed to be sort of easy to use. Along those same lines, we also have this, when it launches here, a graphical package manager that, one, will let you update apps, but that, two, will let you sort of come in here and let's search for the awesome window manager. There it is right there. Install this bad boy without ever having to touch a terminal. And this is cool. It's obviously super user-friendly for people. It really looks like a Mac OS in a lot of ways and has a lot of the same functionality. The settings function really, really similarly. And also, it's super easy to use. It was really easy for me to come in here and switch over to a larger display scaling for the high DPI monitor that I'm using here, even if I had to log out and log back in just to make that happen. It's very easy to switch between light and dark monitors, and they even have the same functionality to sort of change accent colors the way that Mac OS does. You can even come in here and pump in your own fonts. I mean, this is all normal Linux stuff, and to be honest, this all probably sounds pretty familiar to you because CuteFish OS is far from the only OS that's goal is to make a simple, sort of straightforward, user-friendly OS. The dock stopped working for some reason now, but if you're new to Linux and you're trying to find a really simple, easy-to-use OS, or if you're even someone who likes using Linux, but you're trying to find a simple OS to put on a friend's machine or a parent or grandparent's machine or something like that, I think probably the biggest problem you would have is picking which one you want to use. I mean, just off the top of my head, I pulled up Elementary OS. Again, very similar to Mac OS here, way more mature than CuteFish OS and has some real good technologies they're building in there. You've got Linux Mint if you're coming from Windows. This is basically Windows on Linux, and there's a few other ones. I think there's one called like Zorin OS that might be even more Windows-like. Oh yeah, look at that. If that isn't... Well, actually, they've got a dock too. Maybe it's trying to be the best of both worlds and have a super easy Windows-like setup and Mac OS-like setup. I don't even know what's going on there. You've even got Solus and Buggy, one of my personal favorites in terms of like just simple, easy-to-use Linux distributions. I've been known to put this on my laptops just because if I'm out doing something, there's a pretty decent chance someone else might want to be using my laptop for something, and I'd like to hand it to them with something that's actually usable on it, not a window manager that only I know the key bindings for. And I think a lot of people think, and I think it's been pointed out very recently by a lot of people, that this is Linux's sort of biggest downfall. Just you're completely overwhelmed by choice. It's sort of the Netflix queue situation. There's a million things listed there, and you spend all night flipping through Netflix and never actually even watch anything. Certainly, there have been people who wanted to switch to Linux and never did because there were just way too many options. They couldn't even figure out where to start. And certainly there have been a ton of people who picked something, had a bad experience with it, and turned it off immediately. But here's the thing. This is also Linux's best advantage. The fact that there are, like I said, 4 or 5 different OSs here, all with the exact same goal, that all do a lot of the same things the same way. I mean, obviously, on the back end, stuff is different, but from the actual user experience standpoint, things are going to function and look very, very similar. That's actually a good thing. Instead of just having Windows or Mac to choose from, you've got 5 different OSs that are probably all going to be easy to use. A lot of these are based on Ubuntu, so they're probably going to be pretty reliable. You know, you're not going to break things by updating, although that's not always the case. And this one here is super new and super buggy as hell, but assuming that it actually does reach any kind of maturity, is going to be totally fine for people to use. That's the thing about Linux, is there's a million different versions of everything. Even huge OSs that tons of different things are based on, like Debian, have forks because the Debian developers did something somebody in the community didn't like. They forked it and made Dev1 or some other iteration of it. There's certainly more than one fork of Debian. Oh, look at that. They've even got window blur built into the terminal here. That's pretty wild. I'm just going to turn transparency off here for a bit, though. That is a stupid font customization thing. Just pointing that out. Anyways, what I was saying was, yes, obviously on the sort of new user side, having to come in and be overwhelmed by 15 different options for everything from the OS to what software to use to watch a video to, on the off chance that your printer doesn't just work immediately, how to fix that. Advice all over the place, some of it. Yes, that can be quite annoying, but it's also, I think, the main reason why people who are into Linux are so into Linux. Just out of curiosity here, I'm going to run neofetch and see what pops up. Oh, cool. Okay, so it does have its own thing. Oh, it's bugging out on me. Okay, CuteFish has basically completely bugged out on me here. Try and open up a terminal again. And even if you're just looking for a simple OS, there's tons that work. And quite a few like CuteFish OS that are pretty early into beta that will bug out every time you try to do anything in them. So let's maybe go ahead and just quit that bad boy. Okay, sorry about that. I did not realize CuteFish was going to be quite as buggy as it ended up being when I opened it up in the VM. But what I was saying was the fact that there's so many choices, just the fact that, you know, hey, I just want a system monitoring app. Do I use BPY top? Do I use maybe Go top? Do I use H top? Do I use normal top? The fact that there are so many options just for the simplest little task, just monitoring your system usage, monitoring processes, is very exciting for people. The fact that you can customize it to a point where people who use the exact same OS or even the exact same desktop environment, the exact same window manager won't even recognize it, is a lot of the fun of Linux and what makes it something that people continuously come back to and use over and over again. Obviously, my setup here probably looks nothing like 90% of the people who use Linux, probably 90% of the people who even watch these videos. Your setup probably doesn't look anything like mine. I mean, I don't know, maybe it does. Maybe you're new to Linux and you borrowed from some of my configs and so yours is similar, but that's a very rare scenario. Give yourself a few months and your configs won't look anything like mine anymore. They'll look exactly like how you want them to look. Of course, the question there becomes, if the thing that makes Linux fun to use and keeps the people who use Linux coming back is fiddling with all sorts of customization options, making the system their own, how do you loop in new users to Linux? In a lot of cases, the sort of simple OSs have done that really well. I think Chromium, or not Chromium, I forget what they call the Chrome OS. Oh, it's probably just Chrome OS is a great example of that. It's just super, super simple to use, literally locked down to the point that basically all you can do is use a web browser and has a ton of users. Probably in large part because the hardware that it runs on is super cheap and it's like good for students. But still, if you need to just run just a browser, there's really not a compelling reason to use Mac OS or Windows these days. Linux is going to be free. It's going to run better on older hardware almost always. That's sort of the one area of the computing market where Linux has managed to come in, other than servers, of course. But in terms of like personal computers, Linux has managed to corner one market, and it's the simplest use case, people who just use a browser and nothing else for work. And it's because it literally, on some level, doesn't make any sense at all to buy a Windows machine or to buy a MacBook if all you're going to do is open up Chrome on it anyways. Anything more than that, often it makes a lot of sense to use Windows. And a lot of that comes down to software support and software availability, sure, but also it does come down to the fact that rather than the whole Linux community putting all their brains and minds together and building one or two really, really good OSs, fragmenting off and building 600 instead. But again, for a community-driven thing, what do you expect? It makes sense that people would split off and build their thing. I would be shocked if 90% of the people using Linux all of a sudden just dumped all of their resources into making GNOME or all of their resources into making KDE or something else awesome. Which gets to the final question, why on earth is this video even on my channel? And also, more importantly, when will Linux take over the personal computing market? And my answer is, well, probably never. The thing that makes people like Linux is the fact that it's customizable and you can make it your own. If you don't like what somebody else is doing, you can literally just yank down the source code and change it. That's not something that everyone's gonna ever really be into. You know what? Here's what I'll say. Linux will take over the personal computing world when some crazy number of laptop manufacturers or something just decide, hey, screw Windows, we're gonna put Linux on all of our machines and dump resources into building a distribution or a desktop environment that is super compelling, that works well for 90% of users. When all of a sudden there's money being dumped into it to focus room test it, the majority of people using computers will switch to Linux when somebody makes them. Most of the people who use Linux obviously fall into the camp of people who like to fiddle with their system, who like to make changes, who like to customize, but probably makes it easy to forget that that's not most of the people that use computers. Most people that use computers want something that works and don't want to go around flipping through a different distribution and basically a whole new software experience every few months, maybe even shorter. I don't know. Okay. So I don't know if this will even end up on the channel at this point. I really was kind of hoping to take a look at CuteFish, but it just ended up not really working at all. So I don't know. Hey, maybe this will get uploaded, maybe it won't. If it did and you watched it, thanks for watching, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.